All right, so another consideration obviously is SaaS pricing. When you're used to GP, it's concurrent users. So, right, you could have 50 users of the system, but only have 30 licensed users. And those 30, whoever logs in first gets access to the system. And, when you've got multiple shifts, users that don't frequent the system, don't use it that often, right? You can basically share that license, right? You have people sharing licenses, so you don't have to buy as many named licenses with GP as you would with other solutions that are out there. So the way it gets licensed, obviously, in Microsoft's case, today you could potentially buy the base product, which includes all the modules except for manufacturing and field service. And you buy a single user for that, and you have access to everything. And then if you want two people to log in, you buy another user, right? So it's tied directly to that. Business Central has some of the similarities to GP when it comes to pricing, meaning that when you're looking at the Essentials edition of Business Central, it's $70 per user per month. So the difference being is it is named users. So again, if we go to this equation up here, if I have 50 users, that's 50 users for BC. There's no more sharing of licenses, right? So at $70, you get everything except for, again, similar to GP, you don't get manufacturing, you don't get service management. That would step you up to the premium edition. So important differences here in pricing. The GP legacy model of, you buy the perpetual license first, and then you're just paying your enhancement annually. Where in the case of the cloud solutions, you're paying on an annual basis. They equate it to monthly, but normally it's an annual contract that you're paying. And as you need to add users, you would then acquire a new license for that user. Obviously, if you got to deactivate and activate users as people come and go. Business Central also has something called a Teams user. So that's they're able to do approvals. They can run all the reports, employee self-service. They can put in PO requisitions. They can look at master records. Currently today, they can update some master records. So it really is depending on what the user needs, it's a way that potentially that could fit into a certain organization. So different price models. Again, BC is strictly primarily based on users, named users. And that is common with different cloud solutions out there. Now, other options and different pricing. So Acumatica takes a completely different approach for the most part. So what it means is that you get in there, so they have a small business edition, which goes up to 10 named users. And then once you are outside of that edition, they're looking at your commercial transaction volume. So what does that mean? Well, they're looking for your highest commercial transaction volume. So that the way to think about it is it's like electricity, right? If I have a house that's got 10 people in it, but I'm barely using any electricity, I shouldn't have to pay just because I've got 10 people in it, right? It's really how much consumption am I using? How much resources do I need to drive my system? That's Acumatica's approach. And they tie it to what they call commercial transactions. So a commercial transaction is typically a sales invoice, a AP invoice. Those are typically, as a general rule, the highest. So if me as an organization, my monthly average for sales invoices is higher than my payables invoice, they only grab the highest metric, right? So they don't look at all of them, add them up, which is definitely some solutions do that. So you got to be careful that how do they price their solution, because not everybody is completely transparent on that. NetSuite is notorious for the get you in, get you signed for 3 years, and then when you go live and your actual transaction counts and your volumes hit, you then jump 3 tiers or 2 tiers or whatever the metric is, and all of a sudden you're hit with this big bill. So you got to be very cognizant of what are your transaction volumes in addition to user counts. In the case of like NetSuite, you've got both components there. So just keeping in mind that you really need to know what you're dealing with and making sure that you understand the fine print. In addition, so again, Business Central includes a whole suite of modules, right, for that one user. Acumatica takes a different approach where they include core modules. So basically your financial modules, which for most people, if you're not managing inventory, could very well work with just the core modules, right? But then as you need additional modules, those functionality that you need to add to it, maybe you need inventory control, maybe you need project management, maybe you're a full, manufacturing, field service, distribution company, which we have some of those, and you're going to add all those modules on in addition to the base foundation of the core accounting. So they kind of do it that way, where again, this is what Microsoft used to do back in the day with GP, where you would buy modules, right? And then those modules integrate. With Acumatica, we would just, you acquire the module, we update your license, we go in and we enable it, and then everything just works because it's built to work that way with the integrated products within it. Most ERPs have transaction limits over their base licensing and have additional subscription costs. Now, Business Central, they don't have transaction limits. Acumatica has transaction tiers, right? That volume. So the difference being is that there's also a space consideration that we'll talk about next. In the case of NetSuite, they combine both. So they've got service levels or tiers which they combine with your transactions, your transaction volumes. So you have to be very careful there. Again, there's a lot of different cloud solutions out there. They all have a different pricing model. The more complex the pricing model, the more you have to be careful that you know all your costs before you commit to anything, because the last thing you want to do is get a year into an implementation. In many cases, as I hear from former GP clients that have tried to go to NetSuite, they're a year and a half into an implementation, still not live, and then they finally go live after this large effort, and then they get hit with additional costs and increases because of their transaction volumes that no one in the sales cycle vetted. Other considerations, data storage. So data storage is important, right? You're in the cloud now. You're not only consuming, processor time, processor activity, you're also consuming space on that particular resource. So some solutions allow you, and again, we want that flexibility. So Acumatica and Business Central both allow you flexibility to use lower cost storage options for your file attachments. Obviously you got emails, you got spreadsheets, you got PDFs, you could have product images. All of these are what we consider non-critical. They're not stored in the actual transactional database, right? They're links to those actual different objects, right? So we like Business Central and Acumatica in the fact that we can leverage, and so rather than growing your production database over time, you can take all this additional data that you're capturing and you feel is critical, and so it still works the same way. It's no longer stored in that production database. You're moving it to like an Amazon S3, Azure Blob Storage, or even there are options for local file storage if that makes sense, right? So Acumatica seems seamless, right? You press a button, you say, again, the idea of connectivity with other solutions, right? You go and you fill in your account information for Amazon S3, you click a button, and now anytime a user goes and stores a file, which is just a drag and drop approach, right? Then that file immediately gets saved up to S3. If somebody else goes to look at it right after that, it just opens right back up. It's just accessing it from S3 versus storing it in a production database. Again, storage is a consideration. So Business Central, when you buy a base license with Microsoft, will include 80 gigabytes of storage. Acumatica's lowest tier is 50, and then they jump up to 100. And again, you can buy additional storage, and again, that's a consideration when depending on the type of business that you're in and how much disk space and storage space you'll need, right? So if I'm a BC client and I've only got 5 users, but I'm a online seller where I've got lots of transactions, lots of volume, right? My database could be growing. I'm not adding additional, so now I might have to go and add disk space to keep that or purge data. So again, when you're in the cloud, it's a little less obvious how you manage your disk space than if you're on premise. With Business Central, you'll get 2 additional gigabytes of Essentials users. So if I've got 10 users, I'm going to have 90 gigabytes, and then you get 3 gigabytes for every premium user. So if and no extra charge. So again, at that point, then I'd have, so here we'd have 100 gigabytes if we got 10 users. Here we'd have it with manufacturing or the premium edition, we'd have 110. So that's how Microsoft includes that. And then, there are other considerations that need to have when it talks about how they manage the storage, right? So when they're managing storage, you need to know whether or not a sandbox counts against that storage. So in Acumatica's case, it does not, right? So if you want to do an upgrade to the latest version, you would request a sandbox. It doesn't count against your storage. With Microsoft, the sandbox does account against your total overall storage. So if my production database is 60 gigabytes and I'm, only have 100, I can't request a sandbox until I either I need to remove some space, right, where I could push files off to some other solution, or I've got to purge data, or I just got to go and buy more disk space, right? So storage space. So keep that in mind. Storage space is definitely a factor. So this is kind of an overview of what NetSuite does, right? So they say their standard service tier can cover 100 user. It includes 100 gigabytes of, but it only includes 200,000 transaction lines per month. That's over 82 different types of transactions all added up. So 200,000 lines for most of our clients is a very small number. It would not anywhere near 100 users, right? So if I've only got 10 users and I'm that online seller, I'm going to pass 200,000 lines in a minute, in a week, potentially. Again, I'm looking at journal transactions, sales transactions, purchase order lines, sales order, everything, right? Add all those up, right? You add all those up, at the end of the day, that's where all of a sudden you jump up to the premium tier, which is a big, now you go to 2 million monthly transaction lines. It says it can accommodate 1,000 users, but again, this is where they get most of our clients that have looked to go there, or GP clients, and anybody in general that's going to NetSuite. This is where a lot of them get burned, is on the monthly transaction lines, where that then is in the fine print, and they force them to jump up to the next tier. In some cases, that could be $60,000 a year. That's just that jump. So we got to keep in mind that what the fine print is when you're talking about moving to the cloud, because a lot more things you need to factor in all at once, right? Then there's another aspect of this, concurrency limits, right? So beautiful, you're moving to the cloud, right? Now we have connectivity between other online solutions, right? Easy to plug them in, make them work together. Well, how many of them can communicate at the same time to your platform? So there are those are changing numbers with Acumatica as you grow in size and your license with Acumatica, meaning higher transaction volumes. They tie to that. They increase the concurrent web services that can happen at any given time. Otherwise, they stack up, right? And they're waiting for other ones to finish before they can run. Well, if that becomes a significant lag time, the other solution can time out, and now you have problems, right? Microsoft has been increasing those limits on the Business Central side over the last couple of years as they've improved the platform again. So those are known metrics. You have to kind of look it up where they are today. But again, it's a factor because some solutions don't give you that. And you have basically a single hose running in and everything is back up in that one hose versus having concurrency where I've got 5 lines, right? So if I'm, people entering on a cruise ship, right? If I've got one line going in, it's going to take forever. But if I've got 5 lines running concurrently, that's going to move a lot faster, right? So that's kind of the concurrency limits. And it's important that you know that. Again, NetSuite does not normally discuss concurrency at all. So if you're planning on an integrated solution with other platforms, you really need to know, all right, what is the likelihood? Again, those online sellers, that's where it can become a real problem because you've got a lot of activity going on all the time. Some Cloud ERPs combine all of the above, right? So you got your user count, you've got your concurrency, you got your data storage, you got your transaction lines. All those things get factored into what your potential subscription costs might be. And so knowing all those variables is really how you're able to then know what you'd be looking at in the future, because going into an implementation, taking on an implementation is a big undertaking. The last thing you want is when you get to finally going live, it's like, okay, you go to renewal time and you're like, we can't afford the solution. They just increased it 50%. That's the last thing you want, right? Now you've got to go through that okay, you're going to pay that number or you're going to look to go to another solution. So you got to really do the due diligence up front.